In this video, I will be going over lesson 3, which is about equivalent expressions. So the first thing that we are going to be seeing is this thing called percent increase and percent decrease. Okay. Now, how that looks is like these two formulas here. So we have our percent increase formula and then our percent decrease formula. Now with the percent increase, I'm taking 1 and I'm adding it to my percent, but I have to make sure I change my percent to a decimal. And with decrease, it's very similar, except instead of adding, I'm going to be subtracting. So I have 1 minus my percent as a decimal. So when you're thinking of percent increase or decrease, and you're looking at these different questions with different answers and choices, whenever you see a plus or a number that is bigger than 1, it's going to be an increase, okay? Because think about if it's getting larger, it is increasing. And if you see a minus over here, that is going to be a decrease, or if your number is getting smaller. So let's do an example of an 8% increase. The first thing I need to do is take my percent, which is 8, and I need to take 8 and change it to a decimal. To do that, I would do 8 and I would divide it by 100. If you type this into a calculator, you get 0.08. Okay, so I now have my percent as a decimal, which is perfect. So according to my formula, all I need to do is take 1 and add it to 0.08. And when I do that, my final answer is going to be 1.08. So that is all that I'm doing for my percent increase. All right, let's do our percent decrease now. I have 15%. So to change this to a decimal, I'm taking 15, dividing it by 100. When I do that, I get 0.15. Per my formula up here, I'm going to be subtracting. So I have 1 minus 0.15. When I subtract these, I get 0.85. Okay. So again, if it's an increase, you're taking your decimal and you're adding it to 1. If it's a decrease, you're taking your decimal and you're subtracting it from 1. Do not forget to change your percent to a decimal first before you start adding and subtracting it. Okay, let's do our first problem. So this is an item with the cost of C is discontinued, or not discontinued, is discounted by 30%. I was like, wait, that doesn't sound right. So this item with the cost of C is discounted by 30%. So if an item is being discounted, do you think that's going to be an increase or a decrease? Right? If you go to a store and something's on sale or discounted, you would expect to pay less. Right? So since we're paying less, that means that this situation is talking about a decrease. Okay? So right off of the bat, any of these examples that show me a plus sign, I'm going to get rid of, because I know that with a decrease, I'm going to be subtracting. So when I remember my formula, which is 1 minus my percent, don't forget to change it to a decimal first. Okay, let's do that. I have 30%. To change this to a decimal, I need to do 30 divided by 100, which gives me 0.3. So I'm going to be doing 1 minus 0.3, and that is going to give me 0.7. So 0.7c is one of the answers that I want to pick. This one down here with F, I know F is wrong because this is not, 1.03 is very different from 0.7. This answer here, C, is correct. If I think about it, this part in the center here in the parentheses, this is what I just did here. So this is going to give me the same answer. The C variable in these answer choices is representing the cost of that item. So I don't know how much this item cost originally before it was discounted, but that C is what that represents. And D here is also an equivalent answer, because since I would have an invisible 1 in front of the C, I could see if I were to take out those C's, I'd be left with 1 minus 0.3. All right, next question says, which expressions represent an increase of 5% on the value of X? So here we're talking about a percent increase, which means any of these examples that have a minus sign, I'm going to get rid of. Okay. And don't forget, I need to change my percent to a decimal first. So I have divided by 100, which is going to give me 0.05. My percent increase formula is 1 plus 0.05, which is going to leave me with this here. Okay, and much like our last example, the x in this expression represents how much of whatever the original price of my value is. But I don't know what that is, which is why it's represented by a variable. So here I see this 1.05, x, I want to pick this one, e, this one's tricky. I do not want to pick this one because it's missing that 0, right? If I were to have $1.50, that is not the same as having $1.05. So these two look very close, but they are very, very similar. Okay, so let's look at D. If I look at D here, I have 1 plus 0.05. This right here is what I did right here. This one counts. And if I look here, there's an invisible 1 in front of my variable, so this one also counts. B does not count because it's less than 1, and A does not count because I'm missing a 0 in this decimal right here. This needs to be 0.05. So make sure you're looking extra carefully at these examples and questions when you're going to answer them for yourself. Next question says that the following equation represents a percent change on the value x. How can you describe this in words? Well, the first thing I'm looking at in these answer choices is that I either have to decide whether or not it's a decrease or an increase. If I look up here, here's this plus sign. That plus sign tells me right off the bat that it is an increase. So these two answer choices that start with decrease, immediately I'm crossing those off. From here, let's look at my final answer. My final answer is 1.25. So I want to pick the answer choice that has 1.25, which is not this bottom one. So here, this represents an increase of 25, and it's saying it is the same as multiplying by 1.25. Next question says a perimeter of a rectangle is represented by the expression 2L plus W, where L is the length and W is the width. Which expression also represents the perimeter of a rectangle? So here, this one is interesting because it's a little bit easier than you might think it is. This hopefully looks like just like a distribution problem, right? Where I take the number that is outside of my parentheses and I multiply it to everything inside. So if I take 2 times L, that gives me 2L. 2 times W is going to give me 2W, which means that B is the correct answer here. So 2L plus 2W. Our next question says that the perimeter of a square is represented by the expression 4x minus 6, which expression also represents the perimeter. So here, I need to see which one of these, when I distribute, gives me this answer up here. Okay, so if I look at A, 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 24 is going to be 96. That is not correct. Let's look at B. 4 times x is going to be 4x. 4 times 2/3, I can type that into a calculator. So 4 times 2/3, and I get this, I wrote the fraction wrong. It's not 2/3, it's 3/2. Always double check, because I would have went over that one thinking that it was wrong. But if I look, it's actually correct, because that gives me a 6. And this and this expression up here are the same, which means that this one is the correct one. Our next question says the perimeter of a square is represented by the expression 2x plus 1. Which statement best describes the square? Here, if I read through my answer choices, I'm asked to find the different side lengths, right? And a square has all 4 side lengths that are the same because it's a square. So whatever one side is, all the rest of them are going to be the same. Remember that when you're finding the perimeter, you're adding all 4 sides together. So if I take this x and add it to this x and add it to this x and add it to this x, I will get this 2x plus 1. Okay, so I'm taking all 4 of these that are the exact same, and I'm adding them all together, and it's going to give me this 2x plus 1. So what we want to do to solve this problem is I kind of need to think a little bit backwards. I have this 2x plus 1, and I know that if I add 4 things together, it's going to give me this 2x plus 1. So thinking backwards, I know if I take those 4 sides together and I multiply them by 4, I'm going to get this 2x plus 1, right? Because there's 4 sides here. If I take 4 times x, that is what's going to get me this 2x plus 1 if I take all 4 of these sides together. So the opposite of multiplying by 4 is going to be dividing by 4. So if I take both of these numbers and divide it by 4, 2 over 4, that simplifies to 1/2, and I have my x. And 1 over 4, that just stays the same, which means that the square has 4 side lengths of 1/2 x plus 1/4. And that is it for lesson 3. If you have any other questions or would like some extra help, please let me know.